Welcome back. In the last video, we had a look at how a nPWDM, an nLight device, could control DMX devices. So we had our front lights on pole 1 of this nPWDM DX, 2PDX, and it brought up the front lights, and then pole 2 brought up our blue cyclorama lighting, our back lights. And that was on our little stage that we did here, just like that. So today we're going to do something very different. We're going to use the Pathway Connectivity Vignette Wall Station instead of the nLight Wall Station. And it's actually going to broadcast onto a local channel and drive an nLight Neo, which is actually going to drive an LED solo drive. And we have a little LED that's underneath white light, which can be any nLight device. So if we actually went and looked at our Neo device here, and we went into the device overview, we could turn that light on just so we know we're going to look at. Let's put it to a high level. So this is what our white light looks like, and this is what we want to drive with this wall station here. So let me turn that off for now. And what we're going to do is we look in here and we see the Vignette Wall Station in Pathscape. And if we open that up, we can see the 4 buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's button 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 5th element is a slider, this guy here, and another one here and here. And as you can see, even though these things have no function defined yet, the function is none, it is actually showing real positions. So if I press buttons, there we go. So we know it's on the network and it's live, but no functions have been defined as of yet. Now, I'm going to back up just a little bit and highlight the actual nPWDMX device. And I do want to show you one very important property. Its unique identifier on the Pathway Connectivity Network, its playback ID is number 1. Now that's just like calling it Bob or Frank, but we're going to call this number 1. Now that's the way it comes from the factory. And unless you have more than 1 on the network, you're probably not going to change that. But it's important when we get to telling these buttons here what we want them to do. So right now, its function is none, and we can do multiple things with it. There's a nicer way we can look at this using the buttons here. We have devices, DMX, patch, VLAN, and wall stations. If you go to wall stations, and you turn off edit mode, you can then see these things working live, and you can actually run them live too. Or we turn on edit mode, and then when we select them, it's exactly like selecting the device here. So if I select button 1 here, there it's selected. If I go in here and I select slider, the first slider, you see it selected there. We can define its function. So with edit mode turned on, I'm just going to assign a function to this button here. So what do we want this button to do? Again, if this was a Pathway network and we were doing a vignette playback to create streaming ACN, we might do snapshot, vignette, non-dim. There's other functions like Grandmaster and priority override. I have a whole series of videos on how to do vignette. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to give the function of this button, we're going to tell it to broadcast an nLight wall pod. And it says, what piece of hardware, because this is one piece of hardware, what piece of hardware do we want to target? We want to target our nPWDMX hardware. And remember, we called that 1. We didn't call it Bob, we didn't call it Frank, we called it 1. And what do you want it to broadcast on wall pod channel 1? Now let's go to sensor view. Now, if we look at the nPWDMX, remember we had the outputs, some of them are now output 7 through 16, but we had the white lights, the school colors, the flag, the psychs, the blues, or whatever. And then there is also these inputs. And if you open that up, you'll see there are the 16 inputs. Now back in Passcape, when we open up the nPWDMX, we had those outputs, which we discussed: white light, Halloween, school flags, front psych light. And then we had the wall pods here. And this is the red arrow broadcasting onto the blue nLight network, the wall pods. And we can see their current position here. So going back to sensor view, if we look at our channel control, remember on channel 1, we had our front lights. We did this in the last video. We press this button and the front lights come up. And on channel 2, we have the blue psych. We press this button and the blue lights come up. So the next free channel is wall pod or local channel 3, and that is coincidentally mapped by default to the input device the nPWDMX is going to broadcast on. So there's wall pod channel 3. What we want to do is have our Neo track that device. So we click on here and we save this. So now if we were to bring up channel 3 and we said come on, we bring up the white light. We can either do that in sensor view here manually, or we could trigger input of our nPWDMX wall pod channel 3. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to make sure I'm in edit mode. I'm going to touch this first button, and I've already selected this wall pod channel. I'm going to go to target playback number 1. Remember, that's what we called our playback on the nPWDMX. And we want it to go to wall pod channel 3. Oops, 3. So we send that off. We send that off. And now we get a blue light here saying that the function is now defined as something. And if I press this button, it will fade up wall pod channel 3, and the Neo is tracking on local channel 3. And if I do this, we can fade it out. Now that's great. That's just going to use the timing that the Neo has stored in it. If I wanted manual control, what I might do is select a slider and do the same thing. Let's have that do an nLight wall pod on target playback 1, and we're going to do it to wall pod channel 3. So now we get a little blue light here showing that this function has been defined here. And let me turn this off, and then you can watch as I run lights here, and wherever I stop, that's the intensity that the Aldo LED solo drive will be at. And while Passcape is on board, I can actually run this virtually just by moving it up and down here. So that is how Vignette can broadcast onto the nLight network to set levels of wall pod channels. Next time we're going to actually look at how a DMX lighting console with a lighting board operator can do the same thing rather than using the Vignette hardware. Join me then.